So there is a strong argument for the need to be more inclusive, not just in schools, but in workplaces and society in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what are some pros and cons specifically of inclusive education?
Well, it exposes both children with disabilities to quote-unquote typical children and exposes typical children to kids with disabilities. So they see they're not different. They're just like everyone else. And I think one of the challenges was we spent so much time years ago focusing on kids in wheelchairs and blind kids, which are more obvious. But now you have invisible disabilities like autism, and people have less understanding of how to interact with those disabilities and less familiarity in the sense that they think that they don't know how they don't know how to children in particular don't know how to interact with autistic children.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely more exposure and education will help with the acceptance piece.
Right. And it's teaching kids to be accepting of other kids no matter what their difference is.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any cons?
In terms of inclusive education, only problem is when the kid becomes too disruptive to keep in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Or if the kid is struggling academically and needs more support than the environment can give. But
Right.
we can usually work with those.
Mm-hmm. What should schools take into consideration when starting an inclusive program?
The needs of both of the population as a whole, not only the needs of the typical children. Very often I find school districts will say, but we have to do whatever because of our typical children, as if they somehow have more rights than the children with disabilities, when both children have rights under the law and the same rights. A school district has a responsibility to every child who resides in that district.
Could you talk a little bit about what an IEP is for people who are not familiar?
An IEP is an individualized education plan. It's part of the IDEA, which I mentioned before, the law related to special ed. And it's basically the document that outlines the child's education. It's the contract between the parents and the school district about what programs, services, related services like speech or occupational therapy, and other interventions the child is supposed to get.
So you actually have a very unique position because you are an autistic special ed attorney. So
Correct. It's a rarity.
You can speak from the side of knowing what it feels like to have to go through the school system and not have had your needs met in the way that you wanted or needed. Do you sometimes work with the kids directly, or do you just deal with the parents?
Generally with the parents. Occasionally I'll meet the kids, but 90% of the time it's working just with the parents.
What do you try to teach students about self-advocacy?
That you need to stand up for yourself because you're usually your own best advocate, and you're usually going to be your first advocate. And that the only way you're going to improve your life generally is to say what you want. Don't be afraid to speak up for what your needs. You have a right to have your needs within reason accommodated as much as anyone else.
All right, Michael, I'd like to close with one last question. What advice would you give to parents of autistic children who are just beginning to enter the school system in the U.S., like specifically around, dealing with attending IEP meetings and knowing what their rights are?
I would tell the parents, always remember, you know your child best. Don't take everything the school district tells you at face value. And if something doesn't sound right, question it. And if you need help and you need support, call an attorney or a professional advocate. We're there to help you. Very often, my job actually, I find, brings down the temperature between parents and school districts, where it's become a very contentious relationship. And my presence actually makes it less contentious because the attorney for the school district when I get involved, their attorney gets involved. And if it's somebody I have a good relationship with, we can talk openly and honestly and bring down the temperature in many cases.
You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.